Welcome to a special Friday edition of Early Watch, your morning gun show. I am your host, Dead Horse, and we have Tony joining us. How's it going, Tony?
Jesus Christ, I thought it was Thursday.
I wish. I wish.
No, it's fine. This is the old lady's payday, so I no longer have to support her ass.
At
At
least
least, at
someone has
least,
good news.
at least for a couple weeks.
Man, boy. So, did you see anything going on in the gun news world yesterday, Tony?
No, but I don't look.
Well, I heard something interesting, and I saw a post about it. So apparently, the White House, I guess, is where this is coming from. I think. At least the post I read said it's coming from the White House. They didn't say if it was like Donald Trump's idea or what, but uh, if we've been discriminated against as, I guess, Republicans or conservatives, or in my mind as gun owners, they have some information for us to contact and basically tell our story and how we've been discriminated against either on Facebook, Instagram, like various other social media stuff like that. So I was like, oh man, like that's something I want to make sure to go talk about because I don't feel like I've ever been you know muted or restricted or silenced because of my political leanings. I have had it happen to me just for being nothing more than a gun owner and posting a picture of a gun, right? So I definitely want to make sure to tell that story. Yeah, but
Yeah, I can't say that I've ever had a post taken down, but I never post pictures of guns. Uh, I have a couple
right, like I've
decent
posted
ones.
pictures of Trump and I've talked about political things and even stuff that's pretty taboo or not, PC to talk about. And I haven't had any problems. Well, other than the one time I called Bernie Sanders a Nazi, I did get banned on Instagram for like 3 days for that. But that's because I learned that I actually tagged him in it. So if I just write the name Bernie Sanders, then I'm okay. Then I can call him a Nazi. But if I actually tag him in it, then it's hate speech. So.
I don't do
Even though I found an
Instagram.
actual video of him in a Nazi uniform, I mean, come on. But okay. They're like, even though he's in a Nazi uniform, you still can't call him a Nazi. I'm like, okay,
Uh,
whatever.
what, what about a lousy commie bastard? Does that work?
Yeah, yeah. No, you just can't tag him in it. As long as you don't tag him in it, you can say their name and write down their name and be like, oh, Bernie Sanders is a Nazi. But you can't go at Bernie Sanders is a Nazi. Like, that's what I found out from Instagram. So.
I post 2A stuff whenever something runs across that I want to share, especially if there's rallies or things like that. But as
And
far
plus,
as
that was right at the height of the election, like when Bernie was actually still in the race running and stuff, But other than that one political time, like I haven't had any political issues ever on social media. Just, oh, here's a picture of a gun. Oh, I'm banned. Here's a picture of a gun. Oh, you're banned for 3 days. Here's a picture of my kids with a gun. Or here's a hashtag I used, kids with guns. Oh, you're banned. Because you used to hashtag kids with guns, because that's a bad thing. Kids with guns is automatically bad, I guess.
I never even got any pushback when I talk about taking the 5-year-old granddaughter to the range. It surprised me. I figured I'd get a lot of people bitching me about that. But hell, nobody said anything except for it's cool. I haven't put out on anything that I have bought her a gun, along with all the other ones. But technically, she doesn't have possession. It's sitting right here. But that's because they didn't take care of it.
Let's see here. I turned my phone died. That's why I woke up a little late this morning. I didn't wake up until right at 7 o'clock. My phone died. I guess I was watching a video on it last night when I fell asleep. So my phone died. Alarm didn't go off, but Luckily, I have that built-in alarm clock going on.
That fucking thing's going away for me.
Your built-in alarm clock?
You betcha. I used to get up every day between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. Clockwork. And I didn't give a shit when I went to bed. Now, I sleep 6 or 7 hours, sort of. No matter when I go to bed, that's 6, 7 hours later is when I get up. Which is fine with me. As when I got the kids all out of the house, there's no damn reason to be up before dawn. You know, I did it before because that was when I got quiet time.
So this is the thing, I guess. So it says White House asking Americans censored on social media to share their stories. This is from Where Breitbart. Breitbart. The White House launched a new system Wednesday to collect stories about free speech censorship on social media. Social media platforms should advance freedom of speech, the website reads. Yet too many Americans have seen their accounts suspended, banned, or fraudulently reported for unclear violations of user policies. The White House released news of the website. I'm not going to read all that gobbledygook. You can go look it up yourself on Twitter, which includes an online form requesting information. No matter your views, if you suspect political bias caused such an action to be taken against you, share your story with President Trump, the website reads. The website asks for your name and whether you are a U.S. citizen and asks you to share your censorship story. So I don't know. I think that's, they're talking about it like, political bias and da-da-da. But I think almost a lot of us gun owners have been censored on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or whatnot. So I think it might be important for us gun owners to go over to this website and maybe, type down a paragraph or two of our experiences.
I would say so. I'd like to see everybody that's been censored, no matter which area of the spectrum they're in.
Yeah. Dude, listen, I am all for Bernie Sanders wearing a Nazi uniform and running around yelling socialism and stuff. Like, I'm all for that. That guy can do that all day long, right? It doesn't bother me none. Like, that's freedom right there. He can have the freedom to do that, right? And but I should have the freedom to be able to call him out on all that stuff and be like, oh, he's a Nazi and he's a little socialist punk, and not be banned on Instagram for saying that, right? Like, that's freedom of speech. Like, freedom of speech isn't about like what like I'm okay to say, what I'm allowed to say. It's about what you don't want me to say. That's what freedom of speech is about.
I'll see that's part of the whole difficulty I have with the First Amendment and people being so anti-Muslim, because they're free to be Muslims here as long as they're not committing crimes. I mean,
yeah, I'm all for the First Amendment until it starts hurting other people, until it directly starts hurting other people, And there is a fine line to that. Like, if if it was, let's say, a radical right Christian group that's sitting there at their snake handling meeting at church on Sunday, and they're sitting there being bit by their snakes, and they start preaching about, how they need to go out and kill all the black people. Well, yeah, I'd be pretty against that. I'd be like, no, that's pretty fucked up. Like, I guess if you want to do that behind closed doors, like all you want, but if they want to go around preaching that, I have a problem with it. I do. I can't pretend like, oh no, freedom of speech. I don't have no problem with you going around saying that. Like, I do.
I don't know, man. Killing black people behind closed doors is just as bad.
Well, I'm not saying like actually killing them. I'm just saying, like, no matter how much I want to think that I'm a proponent of freedom of speech, there's stuff that I don't want people to say. And I think most people, when they really think about it, are going to probably feel the same way in some sort. I think very, very few people are true freedom of speech. Their freedom of their speech, their freedom of speech they find acceptable, not true freedom of speech for everybody. I think that's the real truth out there.
That's the real truth about all the rights, though.
Yeah. David, we got David Bowling joining us.
I am a proponent of you can say whatever the fuck you want. You bear the consequences of getting the fucking shit beat out of you,
Right.
whatever. But you know,
Well, see, back in the day, if you said whatever you wanted and you insulted people, then you got challenged to a duel. And if you turned down that duel, then you basically lost your argument, right? Like, so are you saying we just need to bring back duels again, Tony? Make duels great again?
Wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, because that was like a real thing back then. If you got badmouthed in a newspaper by like a political opponent, well, then you would just challenge him to a duel, and basically, everything was a popularity contest back then. That if he cowered out and he didn't accept your duel or showed up, you basically won. Like the election was guaranteed to be yours. And then if he did showed up and you shot him, well, then you still won. So,
You know, there's the whole "don't yell fire" in a movie theater.
yeah, yeah.
But like, if you're in a fucking dark theater, can you not see flames if there's flames there? I mean, people take shit to ridiculous fucking extremes.
Well, they try and push those boundaries, right? There's a certain common sense boundary, even with certain freedoms, that should just, I think, probably just be respected, if nothing else, just out of mutual respect for your fellow man.
I mean, there probably should be protections from slander and libel, but I don't know. I mean, if you're purposefully trying to hurt somebody with your speech, that's probably out of bounds. But Jesus Christ, look what politicians are doing today.
Well, look what they're doing against our president, and they do it all in the guise of free speech. Have you ever seen one president your whole life, Tony, that's been as slandered and badmouthed and run through the ringer as Trump? I sure don't remember any of the Bushes or even Clinton after Monica or even Reagan.
After Monica Clinton was a fucking hero. I mean, they may not come out and say it, but most guys thought he became really cool. At least
Bill Clinton? Yeah, dude, the guy played a saxophone, was banging AIDS in the Oval Office. Yeah, that guy, like, of course, dude, he was a cool president, right? He's like, oh, I did not inhale. I played the saxophone on Saturday Night Live. Yeah, a lot of guys thought he was pretty cool. And then he's like, oh, now I'm going to do the Brady bill, the Brady.
The thing is that I think maybe Nixon was right up there, because Nixon got fucking hammered from most angles because of, he was a fucking crook.
Watergate,
Vietnam War. This country was a horrible fucking place during the Vietnam War.
and I don't remember that because that was before my time. So all I know is what I've seen on documentaries and news and stuff of that,
And
of that time.
those probably only show the worst part, but most people were opposed to that because, it wasn't a war, it was a police action. And we're like, why the fuck are our young men dying for a police action in some other fucking country?
No, I definitely saw all this stuff about how, hippies spitting on soldiers coming home, calling them baby killers. Like, we hear about that in movies, but that was a real thing. Like, there is, like, this, like how we have all these protests nowadays. They would literally protest out of certain spots where these guys were coming home out of certain airports and stuff where they knew that they were all funneling through. And they really were, like, every day gathering in these small mobs and spitting on them and calling them baby killers. That was like a real thing to come home to in the Vietnam War. I know that for a fact. That's not just like a made up movie thing. Like that was really happening.
Yes, and that's why, starting with the Gulf War, you've seen a completely, overwhelmingly opposite reaction because of all these fuckers back in the 60s and 70s that felt guilty for what they did. They're middle-aged adults by the time the Gulf War comes around, and they are, and they should have been embarrassed by their actions to soldiers. The fucking soldiers are going over there ordered, and hell, back then they were drafted. They didn't even have a fucking choice.
Exactly, draftee. So,
and we've had that up until it's starting to ease back now, but not much. The patriotism toward the troops.
So, David Bowling's back. Is your mic working, buddy? You're still muted there.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. My phone's worked fine all morning, and as soon as you said, "Hey, David's here," my phone locked up, and I couldn't get it. So I had to shut it off and start over.
Skynet trying to. Those are the
Morning,
roots
David.
of Skynet.
So definitely good morning, guys. How is everybody today?
Good.
Seem to be fully functional.
I'm at work, so I'll try my best to keep the background noise down.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. We were just talking about the White House's new website for people who've been discriminated against on social media, mainly conservatives, Republicans, and gun owners, to go post their personal stories for Trump to read and his aides to read about the social media discrimination that is taking place right now.
Well, I did hear you mention, about the free speech, and I'm one of those guys that's free speech for everyone at all times, anywhere. And I also don't really, the argument of, if you say something to somebody and they don't like it, they're going to punch you in the face. I understand that, but punching me in the face is a crime. Me calling you a jerk is not a crime, but when you punch me in the face, you've committed a crime. So that's the one flaw I find in there's consequences to what you say because somebody might beat you up afterwards.
No, you're exactly right, and it's always been that way since the beginning of time, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's always been the chance of someone who can just like shrug off what you say and walk away, and there are some people that you don't even have to say anything to them at all. They're just like mad anyway, right? And they just want to fight you no matter what. So,
But I am a big fan of tact. You mentioned it before earlier in one of the chats here since you've been doing the morning show, that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because I have the freedom to say you're a jerk doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't mean that I should do that. There's decency involved. So that's where I would curb my speech, is when there's decency involved.
Well, to a point, you are correct, but there's also PC in our country has run amok, and when people don't really say what they mean and want to use a lot of flowery words instead of cutting to the chase and say, "This is what I mean," blank.
Yeah, definitely, and what I mean by decency is me personally having a conversation with you personally, or out in public saying something. It's up to me to control my speech, not somebody else. And I think if you're a man and you're going to do what men do, then you're going to treat people respectfully, whether you're in public or in private.
Well, I think what it all comes down to is that, freedom comes with responsibility, and that covers everything, not just speech.
with great power comes great responsibility, right? And the freedom of speech, and that's a power, right? That's right.
Absolutely.
The shit's of
It all makes sense now. That quote all makes sense.
At this juncture in our society, we are shit. That's the word.
Shit out of luck.
No, we are censoring ourselves.
Yes.
Willingly.
And that's what PC is all about. Don't say what you really mean. say something slightly different.
Oh, we already have gun owners rolling over on each other for scary looking guns, right?
Mhm.
So we literally have gun owners already like turning on each other like rabid dogs.
But
So
certainly in casual conversation, civility absolutely has its place, which is I think what David was referring to.
what do you think of that website, Dano? Have you gone over there and posted a story, or are you going to?
No, I actually just woke up, turned on the computer because I realized I was late and got here.
Be right back.
Okay,
Haven't
so
even had my first cup of coffee yet. That's currently brewing.
did you hear about that website?
No.
So Breitbart has a website that's done by the White House, I guess. And the White House is asking Americans censored on social media to share their stories. And I get the feeling that they say all Americans, no matter what political arena you're in, but I get the feeling it's really Republicans and conservatives that this is for. But they don't mention like gun owners or 2A, so I think it's important to get that message out there to gun owners, like, hey, like you may have been silenced because of your political standings or opinions, but what about guns? Have you ever been silenced about guns or a gun picture on Facebook or Instagram? Like, let's make sure to get those stories in there about how a constitutional right has been, for all intents and purposes, just made illegal.
So I guess let me ask you a question or two so I can better understand this. Breitbart has created this for the White House to use, or
The
for
White
the White
House?
House on their behalf.
I guess so. This is like Colin Noir. Okay, posted it is where I first saw it from, but I've seen other people post it since Wednesday. So
It's
this
on the
just
homepage.
happened Wednesday, and it says White House asking Americans censored on social media to share their stories.
I mean,
The
why
White
can't
House
they do?
launched
Why do they need Breitbart to do that at all? Why can't they do that on their own,
because I think
WhiteHouse.gov website?
I don't know, Dano.
I mean, but
It
that's what
just
makes me
mentions
suspect.
it in here, so I have no idea. So
Because I do not trust politicians at all of any party. And it's like, well, would they have this whole web infrastructure for communicating with the public already? And so when
maybe
somebody else
that's
has
just
to
where
do
it
it on
was
their,
reposted from. I'm not sure. Maybe this is just originating from Breitbart as far as the story. I'm not sure. All I know is it's just
okay,
posting that in here. Okay.
Could it
So
be that Breitbart's got a bigger reach? Like how many people are really going to go on whitehouse.gov, but tons of people go on Breitbart? You know, that could be the reason.
So I'll just read this for you, Dano, since you missed it. It says the White House launched a new system on Wednesday to collect stories about free speech censorship on social media. Social media platforms should advance freedom of speech, the website reads. Yet too many Americans have seen their accounts suspended, banned, or fraudulently reported for unclear violations of user policies. The White House released news of the website, which is whitehouse.gov, a bunch of jumbled letters, on Twitter, which includes an online form requesting information. No matter your views, if you suspect political bias caused such an action to be taken against you, share your story with President Trump, the website reads. The website asks for your name and whether you are a U.S. citizen and asks you to share your censorship story.
Yeah, it ain't Breitbart doing it. It's the White House.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
Breitbart's
and that's an important point, and that I'm glad to hear that. Um, but as, again, going back to the trust, this is simply something that the current White House is doing simply for political points. And I mean, because we have the freedom to call by phone, to email, then there are or snail mail our stories right now. We've always had it.
Are we a little paranoid there, Dano?
No, we're paranoid about what?
Any new information being shared to the White House or Breitbart, or you just seem extremely suspicious.
No, distrustful of the government in general, regardless of party. No, I'm saying it sounds, and typically whenever the White House or the Congress does something, it tends to be more of a political stunt more than actually an altruistic program.
Well, they are politicians.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, viewing it from the perspective of the history that politicians in general have, and these politicians specifically.
Have you not heard in the last 3 years about the discrimination taking place on social media to conservatives, Republicans, and gun owners?
Yep, and I think they're using it as an opportunity to
Oh, I'm
promote
sure they are, but
themselves as
still,
being more transparent than they actually are.
even if that's true, what if something good was still to come of it? What if they did use this whole thing for their own political gain and propaganda? But what if something good was still to come out of it, like some kind of legislatures, like, fining these companies if they're found guilty of violating our freedom of speech and censorship of our political rights?
Are you posing that question in general, or are you saying that that's what you believe?
No, I'm posing a question in general. What if, like, you're right, this is all for their political gain, right? To gain attention, to get voters. It really has nothing to do with the true issue of censorship. But what if something good was to still come out of this, like a law that helps prevent that, right? That might start fining these companies millions of dollars for doing stuff like that.
Something just came into my head that I hadn't considered before because I had always been, they're a private company, they can do what they want. But what would people have thought throughout the course of modern era if the telephone companies started fucking with your phone calls because they didn't like what you were saying? What the hell would people do about that shit? Now, I'm not talking about criminal stuff because they do fuck with you there.
Well, they've been doing it through cooperation with the NSA.
No, Tony's saying, like, let's say they found out that you were a Martin Luther King supporter back in the 60s and they cut off your phone service because of it. Is what Tony's saying.
Now, that's the phone company's always been, or the telephone service has always been considered as a extension of your public area as far as speech goes. You can say whatever the fuck you want on the phone. I don't see the Facebook, YouTube, all that shit from being much different, except a lot more fucking advertisement.
Yeah, I guess I just tend to be very cynical when it comes to any government aspect, whether it be congressional or executive, and unfortunately, even aspects of the justice system as being, when they do things, it very rarely is altruistic and typically is for their own gain and very rarely for our gain. And when I say our gain, I mean collectively us, not us, a certain segment of the population.
And again, Daniel, I'd agree with you on all that, except for, like I said, there's still been plenty of cases where something good has come out of something like this, right? And there's been cases where something bad has come out of something like this. But like I said, like, what if something good was to come out of this, some sort of, from all these stories and all that, and President Trump was to sit down with his lawyer team and they figure out a way and a bill to pass and some legislation and they put in to make it that if these companies are found to be discriminating based on a political bias or something like that, that they were going to start to be punished for it, right? Would that be a good thing, or does that go against the freedom of speech, our whole philosophy of freedom of speech?
Well, censorship goes right to the core of freedom of speech.
Exactly. But are we censoring them because we're taking away their sense, because it's their company, like you said, Tony? So do they have
No,
the
we're talking
freedom
about the White
of speech
House,
to
not
censor us?
Breitbart.
What?
we're talking about Breitbart, not, or are we talking about the White House, not Breitbart?
We're talking about everyone's stories that they go and post on this website, and if something good was to come out of this,
I don't know,
like
I think
a real law or real legislation to help protect us from being discriminated against by social media platforms like Facebook, is what I'm talking about.
I guess if you capitalize the word "if," I would say okay, that would be a good thing.
what I was getting at with the phone company is it was considered, even though it was privately owned company, the people using the telephone service, that was their spot. You know, while they were on that line communicating with the person on the other end of that line, you know, they were free to communicate whatever the hell they wanted to.
Well,
It's public-
everyone that could afford the bill could have the phone, right? The phone company
Right.
just couldn't ever tell anyone like, "Oh, you don't get a phone because of your political views," and that's what Instagram and Facebook does, right?
But that's also why the telephone company was broken up. It was a monopoly.
But even then, they still, you know, your communications on the telephone were not.
I'm pretty sure I
Right.
can call my phone company and tell them I'm pro-gun and that I voted for Trump and all this stuff, and they're not going to turn off my phone, like Instagram or Facebook might.
But they are a utility now. They're governed differently. They don't have a choice. As long as you pay your bill, they don't have a choice.
Maybe social media needs to become a utility.
Well, and that goes to the what I was sensing was coming in this conversation.
I do not relish the idea of social media becoming property of the government, essentially.
Government, with the exception of the military, and even that can be questioned, very rarely does anything well. They do it over cost, and they do a very poor job of it. Whether it's veterans hospitals, keeping a tight budget and fiscal control and economic responsibility, or other aspects of their actual literal duties.
They're all fucking thieves.
So now we want to hand literally our First Amendment over to this same group.
I just said I didn't.
Oh, okay. No, I'm
No,
saying.
no.
I guess you. Okay, gotcha.
I don't want to hand the First Amendment over to them or social media platforms over them. I would just like maybe a bill or a law passed that says that if they are found to be discriminating against one political group, hence, like they have been, Republicans, conservatives, gun owners, that they could be fined with that. That's discrimination. It's basically a form of racism and prejudice. It's a bad thing, and I think that if a law or legislation that would fine these companies, because if I get banned on social media and I go to court and I prove that I got banned just basically because I was a Trump supporter or a gun nut, then if that company got fined $10 million for my case, boom, and they started getting that every day. How much longer do you think they're going to keep banning conservatives and screwing with us when they're losing millions of dollars out of their pocket? I don't think very long. I think that would wake them up real quick.
Well, I think it would, but I think the downside, because it kind of flies in the face of capitalism, as far as telling private companies what they can and cannot do.
Even private companies can't fucking discriminate. I can't walk into a restaurant and because I'm black, they say get the fuck out. You can't do that.
Okay.
So if you own a business and you're open to the public, you can't do that, dude. You can't discriminate.
So how many Hooters have male servers?
Now, but how do we know that's because males are even applying? How do we know how many males are even applying, right? What if out of every 1,000 application Hooters gets in, only one male applies? Then is it an actual discrimination thing, or do we just need to let in quota hires come in like we are with the police force now, so we don't look like we're evil?
That's baiting the conversation, because every Applebee's I've been to, or other Chili's or other restaurants of that, do have a combination of male and female servers. I don't care about the ratio. I'm just saying they have a combination of both. And I'm
Yeah,
saying
but they're not basically undercover titty bars at that point like Hooters is. I mean, like everyone who goes to Hooters knows why you're going to Hooters.
Yeah, they ain't for that fucking owl.
Yeah, and so I'm saying, how many guys? So any guy who's going to be applying for a job like that, okay, how about this? How many people at cooks at Hooters are women compared to men? Is there a discrimination bias there? Like, how many cooks at Denny's or Applebee's are men compared to women? Is there a discrimination bias there? I don't think so.
They already
Well-
set regulations as far as Hooters go that Hooters can't discriminate against a man. So if a man applies for a job, he has to, by law, get the same opportunity as a female.
Can't wait till they hand him that tight shirt and them low cut skirts.
Well, I mean, it is so easy to discriminate and get away with it under those laws because of the same reason that you might deny a female is I didn't feel that she was a good fit with our current with our other employees at this time. You could use that exact same reason for every male that walks in. The discrimination it's just gone from being external to internal, but it's just as easy to do it. That's like saying that the people that say, well, racism doesn't exist today. Oh hell yes it does. It's just that it's gone underground.
No, it ain't.
Okay, then we have
It's
two
just
different
more
opinions.
publicized in the media. Racism died before Obama.
Racism is not dead. Not at all.
Not what?
Racism is not dead.
Oh, I didn't say it was dead. I said it's gone underground, meaning it's covert rather than overt.
And it's
Yeah.
not nearly as prevalent as the media wants to make it out as being. I mean, you'd have to look at your own personal life and say, how many times have you encountered any actual racism in your life? And then look at the news and see that they say racism is everywhere, all day, every day.
Well, I don't know about here, because I live in as far as I know, it's almost 100% white community and probably 90% white in the whole damn county. I'm not specifically sure about the city of East Peoria, but it's pretty pale here.
Right, but the entire country's predominantly white, so naturally most states and counties are going to be predominantly white.
The county seat here is a town named Pekin, Illinois, and they are known for being the racist capital of this state. And it was all underground shit. Because when I went down to work with the guys in East St. Louis and the black guys found out that I worked in Pekin, they said, "Did you ever attend any of them Klan rallies there?" And I said, "Look, I never heard of them." But I don't know, evidently back in the 40s and 50s and whatnot, it was really bad here. I don't think that shit goes away. Maybe after a few generations, but if it's as bad as rumored to be, this place was fucking awful.
I don't even think it takes a few generations. It just takes one personal experience for that to go away. But what I've seen on the media news is that the people who are racist are the ones that are out there screaming that everyone else is racist. Like, those are the only racists that I've seen, are the ones that are screaming that, oh, you're racist and you're racist because of this and that. Like, those are the racists.
That was actually kind of what I was getting at when I said it hadn't went away or went underground. It's just changed tactics.
I'm not sure if we change the subjects or not at this
Yeah,
point. Where
Go
are
for
we?
it, Daniel.
Well, I was just going to ask if any of you were familiar with Tony Simon out in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Interviewed by G-Webs and so forth. And he always wears a shirt, as well as he, not he directly, but he has somebody to inform, sells shirts for $10 each for the point of activism, so that groups can at least identify themselves, kind of like when you look out into an audience and, gee, everybody's wearing a yellow T-shirt today, that sort of a thing. Anyway, the one of the slogans underneath it is that gun control equals racism. And that goes to the point of the roots of gun control, regardless of your actual background. But where does it come from? And where is it today? And then it goes directly to, well, where is it today? Because racism, because of laws, and because of being of this massive cultural PC curses, I don't know what else word to use for it, that we seem to have induced upon ourselves willingly. That it goes to that it's internal, it's not external. And instead of saying, hey, that person is X, and X is a derogative term.
Wait just a second.
Think it in your mind. That's internal versus external.
Wait just a second.
Yes.
Now, do I infer from your comment about Hooters that you're offended that they don't have guys out there? Sorry, that just popped in my freaking head.
That's okay. I understand you swing that way, Tony, but that's okay. We'll let you in here anyway.
I got more kids than you do.
What?
I said I got more kids than you do.
Oh, you don't want to go down that road.
Oh, you got
Legal.
more kids that you know of, Tony. Yeah. I'll agree, Dano, that like I've heard the argument, and I've read the history that where gun control started, and I will agree with that. A lot of it did have to involve with racism. I wouldn't solely put it on that finger, but I would say that was a major contributing factor.
How many cities banned the carrying of firearms before the end of the Civil War? I don't know of any one way or the other.
Oh, I doubt. I can't stand. I don't know.
To give an honest answer, someone would need to sit down and do actual historical research. I mean, either way, whatever the answer is.
I couldn't see it being too many, if at all, because they're in the middle of war. Like, even average citizens were called upon, right? So
No, after the war,
after the war.
I'm talking about just after the war and before the gun control against blacks in the South started.
So that started immediately, because the slaveholders were afraid of being slaughtered by their previous slaves. It started like day one of the emancipation.
Motherfuckers should have been slaughtered by their slaves, really.
No, I'm just saying that's why. I'm not saying it's justified.
Well, just remember, only 1.6% of white Americans own slaves. So
Yep.
make sure you include that 1.6% in your reparations.
Technically, I had 4 of them, but I couldn't get them to work worth the shit.
Okay.
Kids, people, fuck.
So what about, Dano? Have you heard anything else about that online John Hopkins thing? So I heard that got taken down yesterday.
It did get taken down. Just the web page or the program itself?
I don't know. I just saw a post on it.
I'm not pulling up what you're talking about here. I must have missed it.
Yeah, John Hopkins University offered a college certificate program for they called it a pro gun activist, although it's pro gun control activist when you actually read the article and what they're actually saying. And it was online, and you simply had to watch a certain number of videos and take a quiz on the videos, and then they would send you a certificate.
I remember you talking about that now.
I'm
And
going to the website right now to see if it's still up.
and they were hoping that they could get as many as 20,000 participants.
3 hours to complete, 2 hours to complete, 3 hours, 3 hours. It is oh wow. Okay. So it is a 3, 5, 8, 11, 14, 17-hour course.
Mm-hmm.
So you got 17 hours. It looks like it's back up unless I click on this button and then it won't load, which I'm not going to do because, yeah, I don't want that anti-gun stuff infecting my computer. But
Listen, kids, if you want to get an online college for nothing, go to Hillsdale.
Now, is this Johns Hopkins thing? Does anybody know? Is this a response to the Johns Hopkins University Hospital trying to hire private security? Because I know a couple weeks ago there was a bunch of news in Baltimore. The Hopkins wanted to hire private campus security and have them armed, and a bunch of people threw a big fit over that.
well, right from John Hopkins, it says about this course, reducing gun violence in America. Evidence for Change is designed to provide learners with the best available science and insights from top scholars across the country, as well as the skills to understand which interventions are most effective to offer a path forward for reducing gun violence in our homes, schools, and communities.
Want to reduce gun violence? It's simple. Arm every fucking buddy.
But they also, in the original article, said as well as to debunk myths such as it takes a good man with a gun to the effect of it takes a good man with a gun to put down a bad man with a gun. And it sounds, did they eliminate that from the article, Dead Horse?
That's not I'm on the actual website where you hit the button to start taking your test, right? So
That is an anti-gun thing, Dano. They want to debunk the myth, quote unquote.
Yeah, that it takes a good guy with a gun to deal with a bad guy with a gun. They're saying that is a myth.
Right, exactly.
And you're agreeing or disagreeing?
No, like I think he's disagreeing because think about this. When does a mass shooting ever stop? Or when does any kind of something like that ever stop? It's not until a guy with a gun shows up, whether that guy has a badge or a citizen. It's not until another gun shows up that these things stop, right?
No, they're saying that's a myth.
Which is easily debunked because
Well, okay, I understand. I'm sorry, I misunderstood the angle you were coming from. Okay, yeah.
I mean the whole concept of that is just so silly because you call the cops. Cops don't come in fucking shorts and a t-shirt. They come with a gun. Only it's too late because you're already dead.
See, Midnight Range out there says Wyatt Earp banned guns in the cities he was marshal in. I think he did in Tombstone at least. I don't know. I don't know if they did in Dodge City.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they did.
At least in the movie.
Yeah, you basically like whenever you entered town in Tombstone, you just basically had to go turn your gun into the sheriff's station, right? Until you left. And isn't that like one of the whole things that started that whole feud between them?
Oh, yeah, that was it was spotty, but there were some towns that absolutely did do that.
That whole feud thingy, man, there was so much under the table stuff involved with Earp and the Cowboys that
The Clantons.
shown, yeah.
As well as, the Earps being supposedly good guys is questionable.
That's absolutely true. I wouldn't have wanted to been around them, if they were in power today. Unless I was good buddies with them or Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just agree Tombstone's still one of the best all-time movies ever made?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
And it's supposedly one of the most factual ones done.
I know I've seen some things like how Val Kilmer like stayed in character the whole time that movie was being filmed and stuff like that. Like some of those actors seem to go to some pretty, you know, some pretty far lengths to stay in character and to, put out something good.
That was how John Wayne did it. Once he got into character, he stayed in. And I get it with like Val Kilmer because it's pretty hard to switch back and forth accents. You either have to do it, or if you don't just stay that way until you're done, you have to put a lot of mental effort into it while you're working.
Yeah. The what do you call it? Staying in character.
Yeah. And that was certainly the best that Kilmer ever did.
Yes, it was. Definitely better than Batman. All right, well, that's the real question. That poses the real question. Who is the worst Batman, Val Kilmer or George Clooney?
Clooney. Without a doubt, Clooney.
I'd have to say Clooney with Val Kilmer a very, very close second.
Now, was it Clooney just because he had a bat credit card and bat nipples, or was there some other reason?
Well, the bat nipples and that huge freaking chin. You really need to go back and look at other Batmans before the Adam West one, because there's a couple of movies that come out in like 30 and late 40s that are just fucking awful.
Well, they're also a reflection of what comedy was at that time. Think of how, at least when I was growing up, the first time I ever saw Bob Hope and I saw the crowds were laughing, I'm like, how is this even funny? And then I look at it as an adult and I say the same thing. It doesn't strike me as funny at all.
When I was a kid, funny was like a cat and a mouse shooting each other with guns and blowing each other up with dynamite. And
Right.
to me, that was funny. And then nowadays, like when I watch my granddaughter's cartoons with her and stuff, what's funny is like a guy dressed up in some kind of big fat suit rolling down a hill. Like that's what's funny on kid TV nowadays.
My wife said most afternoons with the granddaughter, because they shared one TV in the house when we was over there, and she would sit and watch what the granddaughter wanted to watch for a couple hours before she started watching what she wanted to watch. And she came in to me after the first day of that. She said, "That is the stupidest crap I have ever seen in my life."
Right? Like, have you ever watched that show Teletubbies or something like that? Like, oh my gosh, dude! Like,
Yeah, it's like for kids on the short bus.
Yeah, it don't make
Yeah.
any sense.
What's that, Gizzard?
Sorry, I said that doesn't make any sense at all. I watched it too. It's like, gee, minute Christmas.
Yeah, I'm used to. I grew up with like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry and the Roadrunner and just stuff like that, right? That had like a bunch of violence in it and stuff. The stuff that they quote as like making our kids violent. Man, I'm not a violent guy. Like none of the people I knew who watched those cartoons turned out to be like violent people. Like
Bugs Bunny was the coolest character ever.
hell yeah.
So much so that I got all the Looney Tunes stuff on DVD. I'll pop it in and watch it once in a while. Although it's not as funny today, or it's not as entertaining today as it was when I was a kid. Still fun.
So what's this link you posted over here? Gun control, Dano? More gun control?
Yes, we need more gun control at every level. This is from, or in cooperation with PBS, from a guy named Jack Crosby. This came out on Tuesday. And Starts off in the very first sentence. The vast majority of Americans do not need a firearm, and yet they own them anyway and continue to use them to kill, period. Well,
Read the Second Amendment, idiot. No need involved.
I know a lot of people with firearms. I don't know anybody that's ever killed anybody with one.
but wait a minute. The second sentence. This is an epidemic that stems from a single source. The enormous and poorly regulated market for arms, propped up by an obscenely rich political lobby holding half of America electoral college politics hostage. Oh, so it's about Trump and the electoral college. I see where they're going. They're not saying it, but it's what they are inferring.
No, they're not inferring Trump. They're inferring the NRA.
Well, when you talk about the electoral college, that's clearly that aspect.
That's the wealthy lobbyist aspect. Although
This is the starting point, the argument over whether or not we need more or less gun controls. To me, so I guess this is an editorial, not really an article with any facts, is useless as debating whether or not fossil fuels are poisoning the air. I mean, he thinks it's as clear cut as that in this author's mind. Nearly all credible research shows that we need fewer guns and better accountability and regulations over the ones we keep. The only thing left for us is to haggle over the details. Now, I could continue to read, and the next paragraph, the guy goes into how many people die, which he says, although let me just read this one thing, which just says a lot. At least 36,623 in 2018 alone died, including 22,000 suicides. So that tells me that there were approximately 14,000 people that actually died from guns, but that doesn't include other things as well. Like people who shot because they were in the midst of committing a crime. They were burglarizing people and they got shot and killed.
Police officers discharging their weapon in the line of duty.
Yeah,
They've all been caught fudging those numbers and including those invalid statistics.
I'm surprised that they had the honesty to admit the suicide part of it.
yes, it was shocking, but it made the math so simple. But I mean, I almost wondered, do they think that people look at these but don't really read it or comprehend it? That they can't do the math? Wait a minute. If I subtract, 20,000 from 36,000, then clearly suicide is a much bigger problem than.
Yeah, no, I think they're right. I think the average person who is reading that article, who is not a gun person, is actually reading it really that way. They're not doing the math. They're not catching, because they're not up on it like we are. They're not catching, suicides, those people who committed suicide could have probably done it with any other thing if they didn't have a gun, right? And still would have accomplished their goal. A normal person who's not a gun owner, who hasn't had their gun rights threatened, they're not going to think about stuff like that. They're just going to read those numbers and be like, oh my God, look at all those people.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
obviously, if it wasn't effective, they would have stopped with that tactic by now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I could continue to read the article, but it's just different aspects of that same angle, and I don't want to get everybody PO'd. So
when the hell does it flip over to the whole sky is falling scenario? They're preaching this shit forever until nobody believes it.
Well, in 12 years, all of our cities are going to be underwater again, Tony. Didn't you know?
Great, I can fish without going nowhere.
I mean, they also go in and then attack about the gun sanctuaries in one of my states, Illinois. And it says, right now there are rebellious local officials in Washington, New Mexico, Oregon, and Illinois. The practice will undoubtedly spread like a disease. Okay, I put that part in there. Will spread unless state and local jurisdictions can find a way to work together.
We friggin' hope so.
And then one thing which I think may have some truth into it, because there's always been truth to this next sentence. Gun violence is just one symptom of the larger divide between urban and rural in America. I mean, there's always been a divide. rural
Wait.
and urban,
Right. And
but it's
are
cultural.
they, what are they implying? That the urban are coming out killing the rural, or vice
No.
versa?
No, they're implying that there are differences between urban and rural. Period. And I would agree. Yeah, culturally there are differences.
Right. You stack 100,000 people in an area that can only support 10,000, you're going to have freaking problems. And that's exactly what freaking public housing, Democratic voter farms are doing. Maybe not quite to that number, but it is overloading areas with people compared to the amount of jobs that are available. Vote farming, it's real. Check it out.
What's real, Tony?
Voter farming.
Oh yeah.
Put them on the bus. Bring them on in.
Oh,
Get
it
a
goes
free lunch.
way different than that, Dano.
Oh,
I'm talking public housing in the cities,
Oh.
voter farms.
well, that goes to nobody's ever going to vote against the system that feeds them and houses them. So if you make them dependent upon the government, why would they ever vote against it? They're not.
I know it. That's the whole damned idea.
Right. Right. I'm just adding more words to what you said.
Does anyone else ever feel like George Orwell's 1984 has basically already come true?
Yep.
I've often thought about it, but I hated to say those words out loud.
We're fast approaching Demolition Man.
Oh, I didn't even think of that, Tony. That is a great analogy. Oh my gosh, we are in the Demolition Man age. Like we're getting there. Yeah.
That seemed to scare everybody.
Scared me. Taco Bell being like a nice restaurant. God.
I hate Taco Bell.
Tony, are you on your computer or your phone right now?
I'm on my computer.
Oh, okay. You see the other link I put in the side?
Chicago has its own state. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've been onto that bandwagon for about 5 years. Since how they won't let me build them.
Well, I didn't want to bring it up until you had a chance to take a look at it.
Mike sent me that.
Wait, what? Am I reading this rightly? Right? There's literally a movement to kick Chicago out of Illinois.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah! Let's get behind. I'm okay with this.
All right.
Effingham County, I think, was where the guy that initially proposed the bill was from, but that may be wrong. I don't remember. But Effingham County's been the one on the forefront of all of this stuff that's going on pro-gun wise here. They just put out one to declare the FOID card unlawful because it's a violation of the Second Amendment.
Wow.
And they-
So the resolution is calling on Congress to declare Chicago the 51st state.
Well, wouldn't that piss New York and LA off?
But that would have to pass our state government to go to Washington to do that. And right now, it's our state government is pegged hard in the liberal Democratic Party. So
They'll just sell them to Indiana.
I mean, unless Chicago sees some benefit in that happening, I don't see why they would ever want to.
Oh,
No.
I see benefit. Federal funding.
If you talk to people that are from the Chicago area, there's a lot of them that think all their tax money is getting sucked up for downstate.
That's true.
It says it has 8 Republican co-sponsors for the bill. There are 44 Republicans in the lower chamber and support among many of the state's conservative activists. It's the second such bill in as many years. So it looks like they tried to do another one this bill last year. So
Yeah, this is not the first time I've heard this bill coming forward.
and this isn't the first time this has happened. So Maine split from Massachusetts in 1820, and West Virginia from Virginia in 1863. You know, so there is some precedent to stuff like this happening. So can Chicago split from Illinois now?
Well,
Yeah.
I think we're trying to have Illinois split from Chicago.
Right, versus Chicago wanting to split from Illinois. Two slightly different things.
I can't believe all those Democrats aren't sitting in Chicago right now going, man, we should be our own state because federal funding, like we're going to get way more federal funding. And I don't see why they aren't jumping all over that.
The best idea in my mind would be make them a district. Because if you make Chicago its own state, not only are they going to get federal funding, but they're going to get electoral college votes.
Oh, so
Right.
make it like Washington, D.C. Okay.
But then Washington, D.C. would be Chicago, just like Washington. People who live in Washington, D.C., they don't have their own state laws. They actually, the federal government determines their equivalent of a state law.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem with making them a district is the people in Chicago would go absolutely nuts.
Yes.
And then if you make them a state, the people in Guam, the people in Washington, D.C., you guys already mentioned New York, they would all flip out.
Yeah, because those people in Washington are not, the vast majority are not from Illinois, let alone Chicago. They're from other states, yet they would be determining their fate.
The bit on the electoral college still wouldn't bother me because as it is now, all of our electorals go to the Democrats because
Right.
the way the state's laid out, the law, we don't separate our electoral college voters, whatever the fuck they're
Right.
called.
It's a winner takes all.
Yeah, there you go.
But that's something. Yeah, I've heard that coming up before, and I thought, oh, I think I know Tony would enjoy this.
Oh yeah. Been a
Is
proponent of
Texas
that
still
for
trying to talking about seceding from the Union? And becoming their own country? I know that was talk maybe, I don't know, a couple of years ago. That was some big talk.
It's ironic that you say that because every few years I hear that the topic come up about that, but I never hear it about actually becoming a bill, let alone that bill moving anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'll hear it like talked about in the news or somewhere or on social media, and then it just like disappears.
And I really think that Texas is the only state who could do it legitimately.
Well, I've got a question, and it might be my naivete, but say Texas did secede and they became their own country. Don't you think that the Mexican cartels would invade them like 5 minutes later?
Yep. There'd be
Well,
skirmishes anyway.
the Mexican cartel is not a united force. I mean, if anything, it's a hodgepodge of, they're all doing illegal things as a semi-organized individual groups, but they have almost zero cooperation amongst themselves.
Dave,
Right, when
really? Like,
that would be kind of. Go ahead, Dead Horse. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, David, come on now. How bad could it really get? Like what? Like Puerto Rico?
Hey, man, 300,000 people died in one hurricane. Thanks, Trump. But the thing with I understand that the Mexican cartels aren't like unified, but what's there, three major ones right now? If three major ones move in and are attacking in different places, would the United States government step in and help them? Or would they say, hey, you're on your own. You didn't like us. Now we're not going to help you.
Of course we're gonna help because we're the world's peacekeeper. Come on.
It's
Well,
friggin' Texas, man. Like 2,000 people beat 7,000 or 20,000 or however many ones that they had to win the damn thing in the first place.
I have a quick question. I want to verify something in my head before I take my shoe and insert it in my foot. Aren't for the average citizen, isn't having a firearm illegal in Mexico?
As far as I know, it is.
Well, no, you can get a permit and you're allowed to own like non-military calibers and So you can definitely own a
But
gun
don't
in
you have to know
Mexico, but I would relate it to owning a gun in California.
well, and that's what I'm wondering. Do you have to know somebody politically in order to get that thing? In addition to that, I mean,
I would say
technically,
that depends on the state you're in within Mexico, because Mexico's divided into a bunch of different states that all have all their own laws, right? It's just not one thing, just like America. So depending on where you go, if you go to like the resort communities, I bet you it's way harder to get a firearm permit than it is in like central Chihuahua. Just saying.
I have never checked, so I really don't know. I've heard people say you can't get one. But
Yeah, I'm guessing if I was like in one of the resort communities or like even like Tijuana or something and I wanted a firearm permit, it'd be a lot harder than somewhere out in the rural, area of Mexico, in the middle of Mexico somewhere, much like it is here in the United States. Like as if you want a handgun in New Jersey or New York or California, you might have to jump through a bunch more hoops than what someone out here in the Midwest might.
well, there's the jumping through hoops, and then there's the thing that you can do. You might not be able to do anything about, and who do you know or are you related to? I mean, because most people don't know somebody in a position of power, true power, to be able to say, "Oh, I know the mayor," or "I know the local whatever," and they actually do know them.
it could be like Hawaii, where it don't matter who you know, you ain't getting a permit anyway. We only say we get.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's the point of having? Oh, yeah, we have concealed carry in this state, but nobody issues any permits. Well, then you don't have concealed carry. I mean, that which always drives me crazy when I see statements in an article where somebody will report, there's concealed carry across the land. It's like, no, there isn't.
Well, it does stretch across the land. There's just a few pockets of where it's bullshit.
Well, I would say when I'm thinking of, granted we have, well over 300 million people in this country, but still when there's millions of people that are part of that little pocket, that's still a pretty sizable pocket.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying that in the terminology of spread across the land, that technically is true. Hell, we got it here, and it really isn't that hard to get one. To be honest, I mean, there's a couple hoops to jump through.
Speaking of what we have here, did you hear about the proposal that's going through our state in regards to the FOID card and costs?
Yes. I don't remember what the cost was going to go up to, but
currently the cost, I believe, is like $10 for a 10-year to license you as an individual, because we don't register guns, we register owners.
Right. Yeah, it's $10 or $11.50 online.
It's estimated, depending on how the final bill works out, if it continues to move forward, and there's no reason that it will not, that I can think of, because again, this is the liberal democratic year to this year. That
hold on. There is one reason, and that's
what?
Because it's being challenged in court right now.
Okay, but look, until it goes to the virtual, possibly going to SCOTUS and look to concealed carry as what I'm referring to, they will move ahead anyway and make it effective. And if they have to backtrack later, oh well, because after all, it's not their money anyway. They still get paid.
I think if it's in the process, in the legal process or court process, that it'd be easy to get a stay on it too.
But for those that not aware, they're talking about raising it from $10. And again, this is just to own a gun and buy ammunition. This is not about concealed carry. It's currently $10, and they're talking about changing that program to somewhere between $250 and $500, and reducing it from 10 years to 5 years.
See, that just goes to these gun laws in Illinois discriminate against the poor.
Well, first of all, when anything is ever taxed, right, or regulated whatsoever, it's no longer a right; it's a privilege.
Yep.
Second, is I got a question. So let's say I don't have any experience with these FOID cards, right? So I'm pretty uneducated about them. So let's say I'm in Illinois and I have one of these FOID cards, and let's say I get sick and I'm in the hospital or whatever the reason is, and I can't renew mine. Do all my guns become illegal then? Because you said they're registering the owners, not the guns. So if I'm no longer a registered owner, do I have to forfeit my firearms?
No. Technically, in your house, you don't have to have a FOID card. You can't buy one without a FOID card. You can't take one from the gun store home without a FOID card. You can't go buy bullets or any of that shit without a FOID card. But if it's in your house, it's, so far as I know, and it may have changed in the past few years, you don't have to have the FOID card to have a gun in your house.
How have we not hired, as some two-way collective groups, some good bull shark lawyers to fight some of this stuff on simply unconstitutional and against our rights I don't understand. I would love to see some of these court cases, I guess, and these arguments.
The thing with the FOID is that it's been around for, God, as long as I've been into guns.
At least the 60. I want to say it came around the 1968 Gun Control Act is when it
I would say so, yeah.
Came out.
But it's $10, and it's for 10 years. So you pay $1 a year. It's really not,
Yeah, but it was getting their toe in the door.
right. But back then, people weren't near as afraid of the government. Back in '68.
Very true. We actually believed what we were being told on TV, i.e., Vietnam. But some people were beginning to awake.
I suppose we didn't realize as Illinois residents that it ain't that way everywhere. And there certainly wasn't access to information like today. I mean, you got to watch it on TV or read it in the newspaper.
Yeah, so it became law in 1968, the FOID card, which stands for Firearm Owner's Identification Card. And residents need one to legally possess or purchase firearms or ammunition in the state of Illinois. The FOID card is issued by the Illinois State Police. Okay, so that's something I didn't know. So you're actually going to the police station to get these cards?
No, I can get it online. I have
snail mail.
Okay.
Well,
Police first must perform a check on the applicant on the National Instant Crime Background Check System, NICS, and an electronic database maintained by the FBI. Grounds for disqualification include a conviction for a felony or for an act of domestic violence, a conviction for assault or battery within the last 5 years, or being the subject of an order of protection.
It's very similar to question 11 on the 4473.
The police also check an Illinois Department of Human Services database to disqualify any applicant who has been adjudicated as a mental defective or who has been a patient of a mental institution within the last 5 years. Mental health professionals are required to inform the state authorities about patients who display violent, suicidal, or threatening behavior for inclusion in the Human Service database. The police may also check other sources of information. There are additional requirements for applicants under the age of 21.
I have something that I know that goes to that point and how useless our FOID system is. An actual real world example. Well, it's not an example, it's a real world story. I know a person that has had on and off issues with mental health in the last 20 years. And this person has attempted suicide, but in a passive way over numerous times over these times. This latest time, they were in the hospital for, I think, 10 days or something like that. released from the hospital, and then like 6 to 10 weeks later, got a letter from the Illinois State Police telling them that if they had any firearms, they were required to get rid of them immediately. Now, this person was never contacted, like knock, knock, knock in the door. The extent of the enforcement to make sure that this person did not have a gun began and ended with a letter, a snail mail letter. So there is no, as far as like, oh, this is actually going to do something. Well, if you don't actively enforce it, it doesn't do anything.
Well, that's the deal on that shooter up in that workplace up northern part of the state, somewhere in your area, but I don't know exactly where. He had the same letter sent to him. And when the state police were questioned about it, it ain't our job to go get the guns. We just inform them it's up to local police to get the guns.
Well, that's just it. You know, it's kind of like it's everybody else's job, no matter who you ask.
Yeah, the FOID system is fucking ridiculous.
It also says here that the FOID card legally must be granted within 30 days from the date of the application is received, unless the applicant does not qualify. However, by January of 2006, so this was a while ago, but the backlog had increased with the state police were taking as long as 50 days, and they were in violation of the law to issue or deny the FOID card. I'm sure some people went to jail over that since they were in violation of the law, right? By March 2013, the delay was often at least 60 days. By 2013, so they were still they were in violation of the law from 2006 to 2013. What is it like? Have any of you guys gotten yours recently?
I got my FOID and my concealed carry permit around the same time, and the FOID took 3 weeks and the concealed carry took 5.
Now, was that this 3 weeks for a renewal, or was it 3 weeks for like a whole new one?
A renewal.
Okay.
But I did it online too, which is evidently substantially faster. Because I did Mo Ladies, and hers was the first time she got one. I just did that last year. And
No. But the legislators did learn their lesson when it came to not putting that in the concealed carry law, because the concealed carry currently is, as an example, I'll use myself as an example. I was eligible to apply for renewal on January 4th, in which at midnight on January 4th, I electronically applied. Okay. My permit was due to expire come April, mid-April. My status, as far as, submitting my paperwork and everything, had been in and verified that they had what they needed, since, shortly after I submitted it. But the status never changed all that time. And then the day came for my permit to expire. It expired. And then it continued to go on for another, Another 6 weeks beyond the expiration date, until I actually got an answer one way or the other. And of course, the answer was it was approved, because I had it from before. But they took the whole timeline out so they could take as long as they want.
So basically, for 6 weeks there, you were disarmed and not legally able to carry a gun in your car?
No. As long as you applied for it before it expired, you're good until you get it back, unless you're not.
Oh, okay. Well, at least that's good.
And as a parachute sort of a thing, if there was any question on the side of the road, and if I had an officer that was at least willing to take 30 seconds to read something, I had printed out the state of Illinois statute that states that if the renewal is submitted prior to the expiration, that my permit is still good. And then I had a second copy, another copy of the actual renewal that had the date of January 4th of this current year. So it was the evidence to show not only what I'm saying correct, here's also the proof that shows that I applied for renewal before it expired. But then you never win any arguments on the side of the road. You just hopefully you can have a discussion.
That's where I would just look at you, Dano, and say, we're going to let the judge figure this out.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm trying to avoid. And, and I was actually down in Marion County for a medical class, and there was an officer that was there off duty, and I asked him if he was aware of that, and he was, and so I was glad to hear that.
Well, now downstate is a whole lot more gun friendly than up around the Chicago region. As long as you stay
I'm
out
talking
big
about
states.
being aware of laws, and especially things that are, because and the reason that this is different at this point in time is because it was exactly 5 years ago when concealed carry became legal for the first time in Illinois in my lifetime. I spent more years as an adult without the right to carry a gun than I did with the right to carry a gun. I had more years as an adult than a lot of people in gun channels have been alive.
On a different Illinois gun control topic, we have some of the most screwed up bullshit here because according to the state, it's legal for you to carry a disabled firearm in your vehicle. And I don't know about the case anymore. I don't know if that's changed or not. But according to the IDNR, you have to have it enclosed in a case and it cannot be loaded. And it's the IDNR's law directly contradicts state law, or it's much more stringent, and they can bust you alongside the freaking road. I mean, we used to be able to run with fucking guns hanging in the back window. Hell, I did it for a while.
I remember when I was a kid and I used to see that in either TV shows or movie. You'd see a pickup truck, even if it had nothing to do with the show, and you'd see something hanging in the back window horizontally. I thought, oh, that must be just a Western thing, or it must have been, back before I was born or something.
No, I did it. So, and I know numerous other people here in town did it. It wasn't a problem parking in school parking lot with guns hanging in your back window. Although I didn't do that because I didn't get into the rifles and whatnot after I was out of school.
Yep, that was a common thing here at our high school. That guns in the back window of trucks. Just tons of people went to the shooting range right after school and shot skeet. And one of the high school gym teachers taught skeet. But they didn't do it at the school back in the older days, but they still did that, and it wasn't a thing. Not until Columbine. Columbine is what ruined everything.
And no kidding. In Perryville, when I went to school there, we had rimfire rifle and as part of PE. Archery too.
Yeah, archery too. Archery we actually had at the school. They would actually let you still bring your bows and stuff into the school. And you'd put them in the music room in their case, and that's where they would sit all day until it was your time, until it was your time for gym, and you had archery that day. Then you'd stop by the music room, grab your bow, and then go to the gym. And then and then they even had bows for the kids who didn't have their own bows, who might wanted to get into it, to go try it out, right? So every boy was I'm doing this class. Every boy.
Gives me an idea though. Just popped into my head. Is a compound bow a assault bow?
Well, obviously, have you seen those sights they have on them and stuff? Those laser guided BDC sights and yeah, of course, yeah, definitely an assault bow.
Weapons of war.
Well, yeah, the Indians used them to fight us, so that would technically be a weapon of war.
Well, and you go back to ancient times, where there were Prior to the era of the gun, that was one of the standoff weapons. That and spears. The longbowman.
And if you watch Braveheart, they use rocks,
An addle.
big hammers, and shit like that.
Just big sticks with rocks attached to the end of them. That was probably the most common weapon throughout all of history, is just a stick with the rock attached to it.
I just happened to think about that compound bow thing. There's a great analogy.
So I have a gun question. Unless anybody else has something else they want to get about.
Glock 19.
Okay, problem solved.
There you go.
To the best of your knowledge, what company makes the most affordable lever action firearm rifle?
Mossberg.
Yeah, Tony's probably right on that.
How long have they been making?
The Mossberg 336 has been out forever. And
That's Marlin.
Or though that is Marlin, that's right. Mossberg, shit.
Mossberg dumped out a tactical lever action here a while back. And it's been repaired recently. But I don't know what they've done before that.
That's right. Mossberg is making lever actions. I was thinking of Marlin. Mossberg. I don't know. I don't know about a Mossberg. I'd go with Marlin. You want the cheapest lever action or like the cheapest quality lever action?
I use the term affordable.
Affordable? I don't know. Like how much is a Marlin 336? Marlin 336. Let's see how much those are going.
Like $350 at Walmart.
Cabela's $469 for this one. $450 for this one. So yeah, maybe somewhere in the range between like $350 and $450, I would say is a pretty good average. So is that affordable, I guess, for you?
Well, no, comparing it to most other lever actions out in the market that are typically $1,000 or significantly more, I would say so.
Yeah, that's why I got confused there for a second when he said Mossberg, because this Mossberg, like when people say lever actions, I think of like Winchester, Marlin, Henry. Like those are probably like the three that really come to mind.
Can you put the link to what you're looking at in the chat?
Christ, man, I paid $650 for my Browning BL-22. For whatever reason, levers ain't cheap, usually. And my Marlins both cost considerably more than 336. Matter of fact, twice as much.
And I can't figure out why. I mean, a bolt action, obviously, there's more in it, but you still have all that machining of the bolt and, and that so forth. You're just adding a lever ratcheting system to it.
Probably comes down to what people are willing to pay. I did not bat an eye paying $750 or so for that 1895 Cowboy.
And what caliber did you get yours in?
4570. I have a 90.
Well, and that's another thing that's going to dramatically jump price on lever guns is stepping up caliber from like a 30-30 to 45-70 or to something like some kind of special hunting Alaskan caliber or something like that. Like those lever actions are always going to be, and especially 45-70, those are always going to be a lot more money than a 30-30.
Like big game loads.
Yeah, or like any lever action that's made to shoot anything other than like 30-30 almost, you're going to see a big jump in cost, I think.
Yeah, my 44 Magnum was like $700 too. It was
you have a lever 44?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Marlin 1894, which is really nice gun to shoot. but it wasn't the lowest grade either. It's just what they had in the gun shop when I was looking for them.
Right.
And I'm not
Yep.
good about reading.
If I was only going to have one lever gun, I would just bite the bullet and go Winchester, and just boom, that's it. That's the most iconic lever gun. It's the one you're going to see in the most movies and the most, stuff. It's the most iconic.
You need to
So
go
if
back
we-
and watch old. You need to go back and watch old cowboy movies, because after I bought a Marlin 94, a lot of them guns they're using in some of those old movies were Marlins.
All the extras on horses and stuff. Yes, but the main character, what did the main character always have in all those old movies?
In most
He would
of them-
always have the Winchester. Like
92 Winchester, yeah.
all the Marlins were a much cheaper gun, so yeah, all the extras would get Marlins and all those. I've noticed that too. But like I said, if I was only going to own one and I was like kind of really into that, I would just bite the bullet, save up, and just find a nice used pre-64 Winchester or something. And but if if I just wanted something just to go actually shoot and play with and stuff, man, that Marlin, I would say that's the one to beat. I don't know about Mossberg. I haven't watched any real reviews on the Mossbergs. I don't know. They're just not known for lever action, so I just don't know what they could bring to the table that Marlin hasn't already thought of 50 years ago.
The Winchester thing, I don't know. The Marlin ain't worse gun than the Winchester. It's not.
Oh no, I'm not saying it's the worst gun, but they were cheaper to buy. They were cheaper than the Winchesters, and they're just not as iconic, right? And they just don't have that Winchester name. So, but Marlin's always been a great gun. Like no matter what, they've always made great guns, no matter what.
But the pre-64 thing on Winchesters, I wouldn't let that bother me, because I've had several post-64s that were just fine.
The pre-64 is for collectability and value. Really is yeah.
It costs you a lot too. Thing is, I think even post-64s are going to raise in value, because Winchester ain't doing them anymore.
Oh yeah, just look at the Winchester 22 lever actions. They used to sell for like $400 to $500 brand new. Nowadays they're $1,200 to $1,400 used. So
That's
So that is correct. That Winchester's not been in production for since what, 90s?
Well, Oren Winchester, right? They like went out of business, and then someone bought their name, and then the last I heard is FN bought the Winchester name apparently, and I'm not sure if like the rifle is made like in the Seiko factory, and just the barrel is made by FN, or if FN's actually making the whole rifle. But I read that FN basically has bought Winchester, or the rights to Winchester, or maybe just the right to use the name Winchester Model 70. But they bought something. They're involved in the company in some way, and FN's making, at least at the bare minimum, the barrels on the new Winchester Model 70s, if not the whole gun.
another option is Browning, because Browning can make any of those Winchesters. But that Winchester 94-22, it's the one gun I've had in my life that I regret getting rid of. That's why I went to freaking Jesus Christ, Tulsa, Wanamaker. There we go. That's to look for one of those.
Did you find any?
No, and I was too broke by the time I got to the gun show to buy anything anyway.
Oh,
And that's another thing, is FN owns Browning, right? So that's why I think that the Winchesters are being made in the Seiko factory, by basically where the Brownings are being made, and FN's making the barrels for them now. But I know that FN owns Browning, the Herstal Group, right? Which is kind of like their version of our Remington group over here, the Freedom Group. But like the first,
Browning's
what's that?
And
Yeah, in the Seiko factory, but FN owns them. FN owns Browning, and FN, I believe, acquired the rights or bought the rights to use the Winchester name at the minimum. But they're making the Model 70s, and I want to say that they're being made in that same like Seiko factory,
probably.
but with FN barrels. And
I think Winchester had them made over there too before they went under, but I'm not positive about that anymore. I don't know. You know, there's really nothing on earth wrong with a good Model 94 Winchester.
that was kind of like the first, dare I say it, assault type rifle, right? Like that was the first, you know. I think it was a tiny little, like, kind of like what our M4 carbine and stuff is of today. That's what like a carbine lever action was back then to those guys, right? The amount of firepower they could throw down range compared to anything before. I mean, I had to imagine that back then everyone thought that lever action was pretty much like the peak of everything.
But there was, although it didn't have the same amount of power because of the cartridge, there was the revolver rifle where you could put 6 shots down range relatively quickly.
The holder of the first assault rifle, and the air quotes on that whole thing, would have to go to Henry. Browning's dad invented the harmonica gun, which was a repeater. The revolving rifle, I don't know when that first turned up. I think
The revolving rifle, I think, would have had to have turned up after 1858 because the action's based on an 1858 Remington Army, right?
right.
So that would have to have came probably a year after that gun or something, like 1859 or something, is what I'm thinking. I had a black powder version from Pieta of that a long time ago of that gun. I had like the whole set, like the 4.5 inch, the 6.5 inch revolver in 44 cal, and then the carbine, the 16-inch carbine in 44 cal. And so I had like a whole like collector set. And that carbine was a neat gun, but it wasn't near as accurate as what you would. It really wasn't much more accurate than like the 6-inch revolver. It really wasn't. You're still shooting a black powder load and a lead ball, and you know it's it was probably a little better, but it still wasn't like anything comparable to what I'm guessing, you know, the Model 94 was, right? Come to them back then, how consistent that was.
Oh shit, I'd say not. I mean, I think even the Henry came out the gate being really accurate.
What about the Sharps rifle? The Sharps repeating rifle.
I don't know that Sharps did a repeater.
It was like their lever action, right? I think they called it a repeater, but a repeater back then was manually operated.
I just know their guns from the Buffalo days. They initially with the 44 and then the 50 cal later on. But those were all, you know, black powder, claimed to be 1,000-yard guns. Quigley down under.
The Sharps are legendary for their accuracy. Now, whether that's earned or not, who's to say? I'm assuming it's probably at least somewhat accurate.
I mean, I think this is a totally different product, but it reminds me very much as like Harley Davidson enthusiasts and how you know great those bikes are. Just don't you dare put a paper towel underneath the engine while I'm parked in there getting my dinner.
So we have different varying terms for accuracy nowadays. So I've read some stuff about the first marksman rifles or so-called sniper rifles back during the Civil War, stuff like that, where they would set up these gigantic walls of basically pine board and shoot at them from 1,000 yards away, from a mile away with these old guns. And they would basically almost have competitions between designers and gun builders and stuff like that to come out and shoot at this wall and see which ones could not only hit the wall but penetrate the wall, right? And stuff like that. And they were really thinking the volley fire from being 1,000 yards away and getting somewhat accurate volley fire just into that line of troops. To them, that was accurate, right? You know what I mean? It didn't matter if you hit the guy you were aiming at or if you hit the guy 6 feet behind him, as long as you were like landing shots in that general area. That was the accuracy they were talking about back then. They weren't talking at shooting tiny little groups at 1,000 yards that we do nowadays. They were talking about hitting a group of men at 1,000 yards within that group of men. That was accurate.
Yeah.
Either that or like
it worked until tactics changed.
either then or either that or the sharps where you're targeted, it's a couple hundred yards or 500 yards is a buffalo. Buffalo's a big son bitch.
Well, I think a big thing is even on the first on cased ammo, just cased ammo in general, having more quality control, not being loaded out in the field and being literally weighed and measured. Even on the first, cased black powdered loads brought a huge jump to accuracy, right? And just repeatability versus guys who are literally out there in the field just pouring powder out of a sack and, eyeballing stuff while under fire. You know what I mean? So just cased ammo in general is probably one of the biggest contributors to accuracy. And the sharps, wasn't that one of the first cased guns that was using cased ammo out there? So what's that?
The Sharps 50 was still black powder.
Well, encased but I'm not sure what sharps you're talking about because I know they had a couple different ones. But the sharps I'm talking about was still it was black powder, but it was a cased cartridge. It wasn't ball.
The one that everybody probably visualizes is 1874. So it was a cartridge gun. Who in the hell would want that big heavy bastard if you got a muzzle loaded? Because sharps is heavy. But, back in the Civil War, the North, they really didn't use a hell of a lot of loose powder and ball.
When did the sharps first come available in 4570?
God, I don't know.
Maybe that's where some of the accuracy miss comes from too. It's just that round, that big heavy round. That just.
I thought that 4570 had a lot of arc to it.
It does, but arc doesn't mean that it's not accurate.
Right. But it's not a flat shooter, meaning that you're going to get less accuracy because you're more, especially at distance, because then you really have to mortar the rounds in. For
405 grain chunk of lead. On average.
Is very repeatable even with an arc.
Oh shit, where was that going? God, this senility thing is a bitch.
It is.
The lead's so heavy.
Where I was going was there was over 1 billion paper cartridges made for the North. I watched a freaking video on that. I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Can't remember how many billion they said, but it was billion. So there was over 1 billion made. And they had women and kids sitting in rooms making these paper cartridges.
Yep. And just down at a little desk and just rolling them out.
And for the revolvers, they were cartridges that you just stuff in the damn thing and crimp and put a cap on it and shoot it. You don't have to rip the paper or shit like that, which was kind of interesting to me. And I'm going to start making them for my cannonballs.
Well, I thought with the revolvers ones, they had to take either wax or some sort of similar material and seal off the end of the cylinder with it.
I don't believe they practiced so much of that in wartime demo. They might have. I mean,
I don't know, but at the beginning of the day when you're loading your stuff up, it's like you don't want to be loading it up and they say enemy approaching.
the use of tallow was pretty common. But that's. I didn't realize that chain fires were so common in them damn things. I mean, I had never seen it happen. Then I watched a couple of videos where guys, they didn't put the over the ball grease on there to keep it from happening.
Uh-huh.
They get chain fires like every couple of loads. I wouldn't do that shit on purpose.
Well, the quality control of not only their bores, but of the balls they were molding by hand over a campfire with the little thing that basically looked like a set of like, I don't know, buffet forks, and stuff like that. And you got to imagine, like, a lot of the stuff was just all taking place like in the field, right? And back then, like, they were literally at a campfire, stuff like that, So I can imagine just the quality control between the balls and loose fitting balls and stuff like that, and chain fires happening and jumping from cylinder over to cylinder, and just black powder, unburnt black powder residue being left over their guns after being in the middle of a battle for who knows how many hours and how many shots fired, right? And I think that's probably where it comes into. It's like after they've been using that gun for so long, that gun gets like almost caked in a residue, and then it'll flash on you just like a range can flash if it's not swept up from the gunpowder residue. And that whole gun will flash for a second, and that's what really creates the chain fire.
I've never experienced one, so I don't know, and I don't intend to.
I think it's really a dirty gun thing, because I know a lot of guys who shoot cowboy action, and I don't know, maybe it's just, like I said, better quality control nowadays and stuff, but I really think it was probably something more to do with these guys who were in the field molding their own lead balls and having very dirty guns and not being able to take the time in the middle of a battle that lasted hours and hours to clean them. Like,
my God, you better have time to clean them or extra gun if you're carrying Remingtons, because they get dirty to where they won't work really quick.
Now, I thought I remembered, and my memory may be faulty on this, that at the J.M. Davis Museum, there's one setup scene of a gunsmith's, for lack of a better term, kind of like shop of like,
Jesus Christ, there was 2 or 3 of them, Dano.
And in fact, at the front of it, it actually had the 3 main components of black powder, although the percentages are mixed up. But and I distinctly remember seeing, and although I may not, which is why I mentioned it, is the bullet mold that they had as part of the what would you call that? It's not a scene; it's
Display.
You got a mannequin back there dressed up as the blacksmith, and but anyway, a bullet mold that looked just like something that as if you had bought it a week ago yesterday, except it's old. It looks like it's been used. It doesn't look. It didn't look any different than something that you could buy today.
They had the pliers type bullet molds back then, but I don't recall seeing one with a sprue cutter like modern ones.
What do you mean a screw cutter?
Well, if you look at like a Lee mold, there's the aluminum block that's actually the mold, and then on the top of the block there's a steel plate kind of thingy that's got holes in it that you pour the lead through.
Right.
And then you tap that open, that cuts the sprues of the balls off. And the old ones didn't have that.
the old ones, what it is what I saw is like 1 cup's bigger, 1 cup smaller on the same mold, and you fill the larger cup up. It's opened, right? And you fill the larger cup up with your lead and tin mix, and you close the smaller side down on it, and that creates your ball. But because of that, there's always a spot on the ball that's actually a little bit larger than diameter than the rest of the ball, because that's the spot that was sitting on the bottom of the large bowl side of the mold.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And so that's another reason why a lot of round balls back then just were known not to be accurate. I mean, but a lot of guys did do a lot of things, and there were more than just one mold. I mean, there was a lot of homemade, and there was a lot of creative ways to do that. I've seen tons of different things that not even a company made, just like a guy made it out of like literally like silverware utensils back then.
There's also a few conical molds that were made back then that were, from what I can see, were really freaking good. And I can't think of any of the names of them, but you can look them up. There's plenty of YouTube stuff on them.
Didn't they have the Minier ball back in the Civil War?
Yeah, the mini ball.
Yeah, mini ball.
Yeah, that was
It's the one French word that I won't try to pronounce properly, because when I started black powder, it was a mini ball. But you're right, it's Minet.
Minier ball.
Like everybody calling the Lamat revolver. Technically, if it was French revolver, it was Lemay, not Lamat.
those conical bullets of the Civil War. Those were the ones that I believe that they were caused all the amputations and stuff, right?
Right, that's what the Minets were, yes. But they made conical molds for handguns too, which were not expanding like that.
I think Great Shot certainly added a little bit to it.
I loved the mini. Well, see, the mini ball was heavy and it was moving fast out of the barrel because that cone at the end of it opened up and tightened, sealed the rifling. And when they hit somebody, it's like shooting them with a freaking 20 gauge slug coming out of a 68 caliber, whatever the hell they were using. I just remembered that I bought everything I needed to freaking cast. I forgot all about that. Matter of fact, it's sitting right here in the box. I got the furnace and all the molds for pretty much everything I got. Guess I'll have to get off my ass sometime today. And
58 caliber.
I knew it was up there.
Yeah. Yeah, 58 caliber, I think, was the mini ball. I remember watching something on it about how they were saying that was just the reason for all the amputations.
Yeah, because when it would hit somebody, if it hit the bone, they'd make the bone splinter, and they had no way to fix that. I don't even know what they
The
weigh.
design of, what's that?
I don't know what a 58 caliber mini would weigh, or mini ball.
Oh gosh, 58 caliber, 400 grains, 350, 400.
I would think probably a little bit more than that. But I haven't had one in my hands for a long time, so I don't know.
Let's see this. Let's look it up. So 58 caliber mini ball weight, 500 grains, and was fired by 60 grains of musket powder. 500 grain projectile.
I had back in the day a cast 45 and 50 caliber minis, and they looked to be heavier than the 405 4570 bullets. So, but I don't have them here to compare side by side, so that just may be my head too.
The Minet ball, that's all the paper cartridges, right?
No,
Those were all paper cartridges.
some of them were, but the Minet was designed because it was easy as shit to load when the guns would foul.
Well, that's what I mean. That's the same projectile they were using in all those paper cartridges, right? They weren't using.
I honestly don't know that's possible.
Well, I think what we got to do now is talk Dano into getting both a Marlin Model 336, and we got to get him into a black powder rifle so he can shoot Minet balls.
You can shoot mini balls out of a handgun.
Yeah, he needs a black powder rifle. He needs that big 58 cal.
I shot a mini ball out of a Philadelphia Derringer once.
Those are all larger calibers too, right? Like 58 and 63 and 68 cal and stuff like that.
Most of what in repos are 45 or 50. Cheap stuff, I mean. So what I had was 50.
I remember reading that some of like those old Revolutionary War, not only like muskets and flintlocks and stuff like that, like they were some of them were like 98 caliber and stuff like that. Like, you know, imagine carrying like a little like 4 or 5 inch single shot, like almost blunderbuss looking thing, right? And it's just shooting like a 1 inch lead ball.
Johnson and Dow were the bullets I was trying to think of earlier, the conicals they made in Civil War era.
Yeah, both sides carried a variety of calibers. I mean, even the
Well,
North.
technology, right?
What's
Like
that?
they were trying. It was it was just like World War I and World War II. There was such a technology rush because of the war. Like new technology was literally coming out like every week, right? And they were trying to implement that technology as fast as they could into the war to give them an advantage, right? And to test it out. And they didn't have time to test it out to go through trials or whatever. So they're like, we're going to test it out in combat.
Right, but what I was referring to is, let's say, you know, there might be a company from Maine and a company from Ohio and a company from Illinois and another one from Indiana, and they might have 4 different calibers. Because you know, although in their area that was the common caliber to use, you know, as a United States Northern force, they did not have necessarily all the same caliber.
It should have been pretty uniform because military guns they passed out come from 2 places.
Well, the ones that were passed out during the war, yes, were fairly consistent. But I'm just saying that at the initial part of the war, and the South was significantly worse in regards to having a million different calibers because it was come as you are, sort of a thing. Where in the North, it was still diverse calibers, but not nearly as bad as the South. I mean, I can't imagine the logistical nightmare of having to say, yeah, we've got 20 different calibers our soldiers are firing out there, and we need more of them all.
That would be a case where you just give them lead, a mold, and
Right.
say make your own whatever size you need. I didn't realize how many clones the South made of Northern guns. You know, there's that I've run across half a dozen or so copies of like the Remington and the Cole Open Top that were copied down.
Well, what were the firearm manufacturers in the South that were supplying and making guns during the war for the South, right?
France.
Yeah, so that's why, like, You know, like all the firearm makers were in the north, like, you know, so that's why here in America, that's why we have all the repos.
Right.
That-
And that's what I mean by come as you are, as far as, you know, those individual soldiers reported with the guns that they brought from home in the South.
That's what you see today, these reproductions in brass frame. That's basically what the South did. So if you got a, you know, the hell is it, 51 Navy that has brass frame, that was a Confederate Navy, or a copy of one. I've got brass framed ripoff of Remington of the 58. And then I've got a regular Remington 58. They're close.
So you're saying that the brass ring represents a Southern gun?
Yep.
And what functionality did the brass ring have for the South?
It was way easier for them to make the gun out of brass and steel.
No, but you said there was a ring. Oh, you mean
What?
versus a steel ring?
I don't know I don't recall what you're talking about, Dano.
Well, you said that the South had brass rings on their 51 Navies.
No. Brass frame.
Oh, brass frame. Okay.
Yeah, because they couldn't get steel.
I thought you were referring to some guns have those rings on them that you can attach. So if you drop it, the same purpose as a lanyard, you won't lose it.
That's a Tuco ring.
How do you say that?
I said that's a Tuco ring.
A Tuco ring. Never heard of
Yes.
that.
You need to watch the Man with No Name movies.
Yes.
That's how he carried his, with a lanyard tied around his neck.
Yep.
That was Good, Bad, and the Ugly, right? Or was that the... Yeah, it's Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
And for a few dollars, right?
He was in it, but I don't know if he carried the gun on his... I don't know which one he did. Maybe he did on both. I don't know.
I remember reading something about some southern fort was under siege or something, and they were so low on either lead or tin or something that they were using silver for their projectiles. They were mixing in silver, like from their actual stash, right?
Yeah.
Like their bullion, or but they were using silver, to kill the enemy with.
Well, you really got to be desperate to get to that level. Like surrounded, sort of desperate.
Well, I think they were. I think there was some fort on the coast or something that was surrounded. I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was like in the Carolinas or something. And there was some fort that was surrounded. It was surrounded like on one side by the sea by a bunch of warships, and on the other side by a bunch of troops. And they were under siege for weeks or something. But they ran so low on ammunition, they started melting silver bars. So.
And so begins the legend of Lone Ranger.
Yeah. And brass frames. What do you think about brass frames, Tony?
I got no problem with them. I mean, the Remington brass frame.
Well, yeah, the Remington has a top strap, though.
Right.
So.
Cold. People say they'll shoot loose, but I have yet to see one shot loose that hasn't been shot a freaking lot or shot with real heavy loads.
Well, plus you got to think of the quality of brass they had back then, maybe, and their processes. Because if there's one tiny little air pocket in that brass or something, right? And compared to the technology we have nowadays to make a real solid brass compared to back then, so I'm thinking that, they were just castings. That brass was just all basically melted and cast, right? All those frames.
As far as
So
I know.
yeah, so there was a major potential of air pockets and stuff like that. being in there. And I think that's where a lot of the issues came from, of those guns being known to be unreliable and breaking and stuff like that, was just from literally bad castings. And not only that, but the 1851 not having that top strap and not, not being supported up there, I'm sure had a lot to do with it too.
Well, see, that shouldn't, because it's really supported through the center with that pin.
Well, I know, but I'm saying like you mix a bad castings in with not having that extra top strap, and I think that's where a lot of that lore and troubles come from.
The combination of poor engineering. You got no top strap, that's going to lead to greater stress, and then you have a frame that's inherently weak. That with something that's going to induce greater stresses is going to make it more likely that it's going to crack.
I certainly would not buy a brass frame open top as a primary shooting gun.
As a wall hanger, yeah, I could see that, but yeah, not even a brass like lever action or something. I'm not about brass guns at all. I'm not. I don't know. I don't like them. I know how soft brass is, and I just no. I'm good. I'll stick with steel.
Isn't I don't know if it's Henry or somebody else have a brass where it's really just a stamping on the outside. It's not really all the way through.
Henry does that now.
Yeah.
But I think the original, the actual receiver,
Golden Boys,
brass.
Yeah, the original Golden Boys are all brass, and Henry still makes a solid brass gun, as far as I know. It's just that the cheaper like Golden Boys and stuff, I think you're exactly right, are just like clamshelled with like a piece.
Because the reason people buy them is for the looks, not for the structural integrity.
I don't think I've ever heard of an instance where Henry had a problem.
No, either have I. No, that's what I'm saying. Is like brass. I think the technology is too good nowadays on casting brass, or maybe Henry's machining it out of a solid block. For all I know, I don't know, but the technology either way is so good nowadays. They don't have to worry. We have X-ray technology and so many different ways to check to see if there's air pockets in a casting and stuff like that they didn't have back then, right? So there's quality control measures to ensure that a frame or something doesn't leave the factory today that has an air pocket that's going to, crack and break on.
Back in the day, they made them things, and still today, that barrel and magazine tube are one piece, milled on a Henry gold, the actual Henry. Why they were so damned expensive, and still are.
Why did I guess you don't have the answer as to why did they just simply make them two separate pieces? But it seems to unnecessarily add cost to try to make two things out of one piece.
I don't know, man.
Because any mistake in the feeding tube, it's scrap. Any mistake on the barrel, it's scrap.
I suspect that they really didn't have stout enough metal to make that bottom tube out of at first.
Yeah.
Or he just used what the fuck he had laying around.
Or sometimes you got to do things just a little bit different just to separate yourself apart, whether that what you're doing is for a good reason or not. But it might even cost you a little bit more money to do it that way, but sometimes you need something like that to kind of distinguish yourself, and then,
It was only done on that first one, too. Because when they made the 66 yellow boy, whatever the hell they call it, Golden Boy, with the wood forestock, they went to the King's loading gate and the separate magazine tube. I think that the one-piece setup is why that rifle didn't sell as well, because people just couldn't afford it because it's really freaking expensive. And part of the reason, I suppose, why it wasn't part of our military, unless the soldiers bought them themselves.
What rifles did they have at Custard's last stand? They were Sharps and what else? I think didn't they have Sharps rifles and something else?
The Indians had an assortment of repeaters.
Custard had access to Gatling guns, but neglected to bring them because it would slow them down.
That was where they got really screwed over, because the Indians had amassed a collection of Henrys and Spencers, or whatever the hell current they could get a hold of, repeaters. Custer was an idiot.
I mean, he was until the end. He was a lucky idiot, which is the only reason he had the success that he did, because he put his ego out there,
No shit.
and and his career was completely written by an ego until he wrote a check that his ass could not cash.
Yeah, and he's no one in their right freaking mind should do what he did. I mean, not take Gatling guns, not take or wait for the rest of the troop to be in position.
Yeah,
I can't remember what gun it was, but
all for the point of his personal glory. Fuck his men, his personal glory. Excuse me, my language there, but
I remember reading that I can't remember if it was the Sharps or what rifle it was, but one of the rifles they had there was like so problematic and difficult to load. That was like one of the like they have found full ammo all over that battlefield.
What?
That was dropped because of fumbling trying to load the rifle under stress, because
What?
and the rifles were so difficult to load, right?
What that was, I think it was a converted Sharps, where they put the trapdoor thingy on the top that you flipped open, because those things were notorious for sticking the case in the cylinder after they fired. Pop the bottom of the case off, and you'd have to get a knife out and dig the thing out. Yeah, those things were awful.
meanwhile,
Yeah, I
there's
can't
5,000
remember for
Indians with repeaters shooting at you.
Yeah, I can't remember for sure. I'll have to go read, but I know for a fact I've read that they have found live ammunition all over that battlefield that was dropped from the soldiers because they couldn't, they were literally having such a hard time reloading this certain rifle, and it might have been the Sharps. That's what I'm thinking it was, but I can't remember for sure.
Not only was there, the Indians have repeaters, there was a freaking lot more of them. I mean, I think it was like, she's 20-1. Custer really didn't have that many people with him, because they had all split. They were supposed to attack from 3 different points. Didn't quite work out that way.
Well, I think another thing that I remember reading is he set off a bunch of scout parties in groups of 2, right? So he set off like a dozen scout parties and depleted his, like 24 men or something, right? In all different directions. So I remember reading something like that. And then by the time that some of those men heard shots and and then got back, right? Like they were, or that they were caught out solo alone, just 2 guys, and cut down.
When they left, there were supposed to be 3 different forts sending people. Custer didn't wait, and he took whatever it is, battalion or whatever, and he divided that into 3 so they could do a 3-pronged attack. But I don't know if he didn't wait or the Indians started first. I don't remember. But he made as many freaking tactical errors as anybody that day. And you can look at it from, looking back on it and think, God, that was friggin' stupid.
Now, this is an interesting side note to Custer, just as far as the man and his career. I'm just reading a little thing here off of history.com. It says his Custer's first assignment was helping Major General Winfield S. Hancock carry out a shock and awe campaign to overwhelm the Indians. At the end of the campaign, Custer deserted, joined his wife at Fort Riley. He was court-martialed in 1867 and suspended without rank and pay for 1 year. Now, this is before he died. Now, how do you go from? I mean, in time of war is one thing, but this was like a war of attrition. This was not like gee, we got to kill tomorrow or they're going to kill us.
He was a Civil War hero. That what's that?
He was a field general.
A field general, yeah, field promotion to general. Twice he got that. Twice, Tony. So I actually have a big, giant, huge painting of General Custer in my living room. Believe it or not, I really do. You can ask G. Webbs; he's seen it. And so I've read a lot about this guy because I obviously have a painting of him in my front room for some reason, right? And but he at like Gettysburg, he was awarded several times, even turned down some of the awards, and gave that award to his men, to someone like below him that he was in charge of. He's like, oh no, I don't deserve this award. Like, give it to my lieutenant or whatever. He did this or that. So he was absolutely loved by his men, and he was a war hero. He did some miraculous charges and some just things that took balls the size of just mountains to do, and against just numerous odds. I mean, the guy was an all-around hero. He really was. That's how he got back into the game, even after being discharged, is because of that reputation and the connection.
Heroes do not desert the army in the middle of a campaign. And the campaign of the Indians was not over when he deserted. Now, I realize he was taken back. I'm just saying, and this is just my personal view.
Now, come on, man. Been for 6 months without a piece. You wouldn't sneak home and get one?
He didn't sneak home and get one. He snuck home and stayed there.
Oh, his wife was pretty.
You're assuming.
No, pictures I've seen of her, she's pretty. Part of that, there was probably some friction between him and higher ups that people even farther up decided wasn't quite his fault or some stupid crap like that. He knew somebody, who knows? He gave back in that way. His attack in the battle that got him killed was another one that took great big cojones to do, or very small brain cell.
Or a massive ego. I mean, in some ways, it kind of reminds me of old Blood and Guts Patton. Your blood and his guts.
In order to get men to charge up a ditch and across the field with lead flying all around you and explosions and almost a certain death, you have to be a larger than life character to get men to follow you like that. I'm sorry, but it's the damn truth.
Right.
Yeah, and it was kind of taboo to shoot officers. But that, you got thousands of bullets flying around there.
Not by the Indians, it wasn't taboo.
Well, I was talking in the Civil War.
Oh, okay.
Where he became the hero.
Well, he got his horse shot under him, what, a dozen times? I mean, they weren't. I'm sure they were shooting at him, and it accidentally hit the bigger target, which was his horse.
See, I think the thing is they weren't really shooting at anybody because they were shooting at everybody.
Well, there is that. I mean, depending on the type of battle it is, yes.
something I've considered. If you look at some of these towns that are stuck together after shit hits the fan situation, and they're looking at a group of people coming towards them, and you got a number of armed people on one side, armed people on the other. Who shoots at who to make sure that you're not shooting at everybody's shooting at the same guy? Well, that freaking killed it.
No, I'm actually I'm listening to you, but I'm also kind of reading a little bit more about Custer here.
I'll tell you one thing. That guy was anything but a coward, though. So he definitely had faults. He definitely made bad military decisions. But I don't think that necessarily means he was a bad guy. And
Well, as long as your decisions don't get other people killed, I would agree with you.
Wait a minute. That's you can't go there because that's the nature of war.
No, sure, I can go there.
Their decisions, if you're in leadership, are going to get people killed.
yeah.
No, your bad decisions get people unnecessarily killed. The idea is to kill the other guy. I forget how Patton phrased it. Not sure I should be bringing him up, but let that guy die for his country.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But, these wars are usually fought to the standards of the war before.
Well, it was a massive. I mean, let's call it for what it is. It was the United States genocide against the indigenous American people, and it wasn't over until it was complete.
Well, what America did along that lines should be unforgivable.
Manifest destiny.
Right. Let's kill all the freaking buffaloes so we can starve them out.
Yeah.
What the hell kind of chicken is that?
That is exactly why so many civilians got killed, because the army was going around encouraging not only just the buffalo hunters, but just anybody to randomly kill buffalo anytime they saw them, because they knew that's the only way many of the Indians survived. And then you wonder, gee, why did the Indians go after so many, civilians? Well, because of that.
Well, I don't know. You can't really envision what the buffalo were like back when they were roaming here before the great freaking kill off, if you will.
Can you repeat what you said again? I can't quite understand.
You can't hardly imagine what buffalo herds looked like before they started trying to exterminate them. They were massive freaking herds.
Right. And so it wasn't just it was annihilation of the American indigenous personnel via the buffalo. You kill off their source of meat and income, you kill them.
There's a really good guy on Joe Rogan's podcast that talks about that has been researching that very thing. And he has pretty strong, I'm not saying this guy's right, but he has pretty strong evidence to say that the buffalo herds were already dying out when that was all happening, that Native Americans were already in the process of exterminating the buffalo and phasing them out, basically taking them to the point of extinction long before people came out west and had that whole push. That was like a thing that was already going on, and that if they never would have pushed out west, the exact same thing would have happened. It wouldn't. That's at least he has some evidence towards that. And again, I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I'm sure if you just typed in Joe Rogan's podcast Buffalo, I'm sure it'd probably be the first video that popped up. But that's something that you might want to listen to, because that guy does make some really good points and does have some pretty convincing evidence towards that.
Well, if you think about it, there's really no way a population could exist with a population of buffalo like that. there just isn't enough friggin' space. But I don't know. Think the Indians would have killed for the same reason, to deprive other tribes of food? I mean, we have buffalo here. There's a place about 10 miles away that's got, I don't know, a couple dozen. And they're pretty good sized critters. If we had buffalo herds like that today, there would be no hunger issues. You probably wouldn't have it on or anything either, because they just plow everything up when they come through, and eventually they're going to get here for grass.
You know, I have often wondered when thinking of the Old West, why we chose, other than tradition, why we chose cattle over just, domesticating the bison that were already here and clearly could live off the land.
They're harder to herd.
They're what?
Buffalo are harder to herd. You get a group of buffalo and, they stampede, you don't stop them because, shit, they weigh.
Yeah, the buffalo is far, far more aggressive than regular cattle are.
And humans had already domesticated cattle, so they just went with what they knew. I mean, there's domesticated buffalo around now, or reasonably domesticated, pen raised.
I posted the link to the Joe Rogan podcast out there on the YouTube gun channels and in the internal here. It's number 784 with Brian Redband, Native Americans, Buffalo, Columbus Day. But this is where I believe this is the one where they actually talk about the how the buffalo was already on its way to extinction long before like the railroad and everything came through the West and stuff like that, and Manifest Destiny. But how they were kind of already on their way out, But again, I'm not saying that guy's right or wrong, but that'd be something interesting to talk about if you guys want to watch that. Maybe we could talk about that next week or something. Just a short little 6-minute clip, I think. There's a much longer one where they literally, they like most of his podcasts, he'll talk for a couple hours or whatnot, but that's just, one of the many conversations they had, about a 6-minute clip. There might be more than that to it, but that's at least the start of it.
Well, I'm just curious how much buffalo were killed by whites, basically, that people that are non-Indian that were traveling out there during the Mountain Man time.
Oh, no. So I think what their point was is that like at the height of the Native American population, before like Columbus came to America, right? Buffalo was already on the way to extinction. But once settlers came here, like long before the railroads still, right? Like we're talking like before Revolutionary War times, people were still coming out west, smallpox, all that kind of stuff, decimated Native American tribes across the entire country, all the way out to California. Before like whites had even gone to California, disease was decimating Native American tribes in California because of the way the tribes worked and intermingled with each other. And so it decimated the Native American population across all of America. A couple hundred years later, when they're 300 years later, when they're building railroads across America, we have this huge buffalo population. Do you know why? Because there's not as many Native Americans to take care of them anymore. So there was this huge bloom in buffalo population that was totally abnormal, because of the Native Americans basically being cut down. And but that's the point he all makes, and like I said, he has some good evidence to back that up. but that whole millions of buffalo herds, like that was an abnormal thing. That wasn't normal. That was because hundreds of years before, Native Americans had been wiped out by disease.
I can see that because
Well, yeah,
massive
population
herds
in
of buffalo-
animals always come and go in cycles in regards to the environments that they're in. I mean, that is a natural thing.
and buffaloes, when they were in the gigantic herds, whenever they went somewhere, after they left it, it was plowed ground, basically. And I've read that there's been those swaths of them things passing that are over a mile wide, just completely devoid of any growth.
Heck, can you imagine moving out somewhere like Wyoming or something and trying to like grow a little farm and then having like a little herd of buffalo come through, right, to come eat all your crops and like trying like trying to deal with that?
I mean, you
I'm
look
sure some fence posts ain't gonna keep them out.
you look at somebody locally that grows, a couple cows, maybe a horse, and the pasture they keep them cows in don't got no grass after a year. The cattle just walk it down. So yeah, I can see what the buffalo started.
That's why you see the horses stick their head through the fence, or the cows stick their. You wonder why that. What's the difference between the grass on the other side of the fence and the side of the fence that they're actually walking in? Well, all the fresh shoots are on the other side of the fence because they already ate and trampled down all the good stuff in the pasture.
My boss had a few draft horses, and I think the most he ever had was like 6 at one time. And within a year, they had completely trampled down the acre pasture they were in, turned out on.
And there were how many horses there?
5 or 6 at the most.
Okay, well then on 1 acre.
No, they were turned onto a new acre, but the other ground was barren already. So that they were on about a 2-acre patch.
Okay, because even 2 acres is, if I remember correctly, is woefully insufficient for that number of horses. If you want actual grass to exist.
They got
Hell,
ton of-
Dano, there are some places with regulations that in order to have a horse, you have to have a third of an acre. That's it.
Right, but then you have to be willing to accept that you're going to have bare ground there.
right,
because-
and that's what I'm trying to get at. Where the buffalo herds went after they passed, that's what you had, bare ground, plowed bare
Right.
ground.
Right, but it was a temporary thing. They would have thinned themselves out through habitat destruction that they themselves created. I mean, nature has a way
Yeah, eventually, yeah, they would have.
big of culling the herd, whether it's disease or whether it's starvation, and getting those numbers back into a balance.
Yeah, but then we come along and decide to kill off the Indians' food source.
Right, interfering once again with the balance.
I don't know. A lot of times you see that they made some really freaking short-sighted decisions. I'll be right back. I need a refill.
Poor buffalo. I don't know. Have you ever had a buffalo steak though? Oh boy. Yep. We know why. I definitely know why Native Americans preferred to hunt buffalo over deer. Just saying.
I've never seen it on a menu in a place I've eaten.
You need to come out west and just go into a restaurant in Idaho or Wyoming or.
So, where do you think culturally? Where does the West begin as as someone's traveling eastward?
The Rockies, the mountains, is where the West really begins. Everything else that's east of the mountains is the Midwest.
Okay.
West doesn't start till you hit the Rockies, until you hit mountains. So basically, Colorado, That's where the West starts. Western Colorado. At least in my mind. To me, that's where the West starts.
Right.
Everything else is just Midwest.
Because historically, when people from the East would refer to the West, they really just meant west of the Mississippi, because in regards to lawlessness and things like that, whether it be Missouri or Iowa or Kansas or, of course, Oklahoma was Indian territory. But that was all west to them because they were viewing it from a cultural perspective, not necessarily a topographical perspective.
No, I don't know. I still got to stick with Wyoming, Colorado. That's
Oh yeah, I think in current terms you're right, because for the most part the United States is a lot more homogenous today than it was in we'll call it 1850. 1850, by the Wild West, meaning no laws, no controls, that started the other side of the Mississippi. It didn't start at the beginning of the Rocky Mountains.
yeah. We're gonna go out west. Oh, where are you going to? Oh, we're gonna go to West Tennessee. Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, the
Tennessee is on the east side of the Mississippi, though.
Oh,
the western states, California, Oregon, and Washington, weren't considered the West. If we're talking Wild West, that was
Right.
Wild West was like Kansas, Eastern Colorado, Eastern Wyoming. I think that like before, right up to the Rockies, that was all the Wild West.
But it also went all the way up north to the Dakotas.
into Arizona.
Yep.
It's funny, you think about it, and then you start seeing it described in various documentaries and whatnot, that the Wild West was actually the middle part of the country.
Yep.
California and the West Coast was settled before.
Right, due to the Spanish.
Right, yeah, like before Kansas got settled. Probably before we did the Louisiana Purchase and stuff, it was probably settled, but well before anybody got wild in the West. That's stuff that they don't generally teach you in school.
Yeah.
Well, I always think it's funny when I hear people use terms like, "Oh, it's going to be like the Wild West out here" and all that. And really, like when you actually look at like crime statistics and murders and stuff from like back then, like it wasn't bad. It was like nothing. Like even for population density, whether you want to go on like per 1,000 people or whatever, when you look at rapes, murders, stuff like it was not bad compared to like, places nowadays. It wasn't even. It was. There was no blood running in the streets like that. It wasn't a thing.
Nope. Wild
There,
West.
what there was pulp culture, and there was books and like little kind of basically the first version of comic books and stuff that made a lot of celebrities out of nobodies that really didn't do much, and stuff like that, and like made everyday people into Supermen all the time, and just a lot of craze and hype. But there wasn't like blood running in the streets in the Wild West like that. That wasn't a thing. Like it wasn't the carnage they picture.
So you're trying to tell me that those dirty cheating sidewinders weren't battling out in the middle of the street, after a good game of poker and some whiskey?
Yeah, like literally the whole showdown thing happened one time. Out of all the movies and books and everything about the showdown at noon, the high noon show, like that really happened in real life one time. So, and it took place like 100 yards away, like from each other. Like it wasn't even like
they were like freaking 80 yards apart. It's luck that ended that one.
Yeah, it was. But Yeah, so like almost all that's so much just lore and fairy tale and just like, but like when you actually look at like, you can actually find like crime statistics from like Dodge City and like from some of the supposedly most rough and tumble cities, right? And you actually look at like how many murders they had a year compared to like how many thousands of people, and then compare that nowadays to even smaller communities, you're like, oh, dude. This is like your average town nowadays. It's not a thing. There wasn't all this violence back then.
And that the whole gun control thing, like where they made you put up your guns, it wasn't because of crime. It was because they was afraid of drunk fuckers out shooting windows.
Yeah, shoot or just shooting up the ceiling in the saloon and stuff like that, having fun. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like hell. How popular would Wild Bill Hickok have ever become had he not been?
Friends with Big Nose Kate?
No, he wasn't.
Yes, he was friends.
Had he not been so colorfully laid out in the dime novel.
Well, even then, looking at the pictures, the black and white tintypes, he was clearly the way he dressed and he did his hair and everything. What dressed himself or his it's not dressed himself, but the way he outfitted himself, what was very flamboyant, and it
Right, but did that happen after the dime novel?
I don't have an answer for
The
that.
original dime novel on him came out really early.
when he was still alive, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That made him yeah,
I mean, because that's how he, got to know like
Buffalo
Bill
Bill.
Cody and how he was an attraction in New York City. So he got in that Wild West show, Bill Cody's, was because of those dime novels. But he hated doing it, which is why he only did it for a short period of time.
He I think it was right after that Touch showdown that he got popularized in the dime novel. That was pretty damn early on. And you think about it, he carried 36 caliber Captain Ball. I wouldn't want to shoot somebody at 75 yards with it and hope to put him down. Any 36 that I've ever seen wasn't overly powerful. It wasn't impressive anyway. Of course, I wouldn't want to stand each out with one, but I don't know what he did to load them. I think I'm gonna buy my wife one though.
Well, I mean, in some ways, it kind of shows you don't necessarily have to have the latest, most technologically super duper gadget to win the fight. That clearly mindset and tactics are superior to necessarily the tool that you're using, depending on the situation.
Well, as far as tool go, he never upgraded, so
Say it again.
he never upgraded. When he died, he was still rocking the 36 Navy.
Right. That's what I mean. I mean, but when he died, it wasn't as a result of that. It was, he got bushwhacked, got shot in the back of the head.
I mean, you know what year he died in?
No, I don't remember offhand.
What's that, Tony?
What year did Wild Bill die?
Oh, 1876. He was only 40 years old.
So the 73 would have been around at that point.
Another thing that's interesting is that at his last job, I forget the name of the town. It was a mining town. Is supposedly from others is he was really starting to lose most of his vision.
Yeah, he was, according to everything I've ever seen, going blind, probably from VD.
And whether you're a lawman, that has a reputation, has brought in a lot of people, or you're a bad guy that you've done a lot of bad things to. There's a lot of people that want to kill you. Losing your vision is right up there with the death sentence. Anybody can walk up to you at some point and kill you. Anybody who, you arrested or you shot and killed his great uncle or whatever. Vendettas were a common thing back then. I mean, today we just get mad and we hold that grudge. Back then, they actually executed the grudge.
Well, back then you could actually shoot a motherfucker for offending you and get by with it.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to point out about Wild Bill Hickok is because I got a book on that guy. Because of like the photograph process back then, like it like the color red didn't show up as like light, it showed up as like dark brown or dark black in the photos. Wild Bill Hickok was redheaded. So he wasn't the brown haired guy that you see in all the movies and stuff like that. He was a long redheaded guy.
Oh.
He had bright red hair.
And
you know why?
If you want to believe HBO, man, his last gig was in Deadwood.
I get a trivia question for you guys. Do you know why Big Nose Kate was called Big Nose Kate?
Because she was nosy, sticking her nose in everybody's business.
Dead horse? What's your guess?
I don't know. What is it, Daniel? You tell me.
Actually, Tony pretty much hit it on the head. She was always listening for information in other people's conversations. So she was the person to go to if you want to get the lowdown about this person or that person. So, yeah, it was not about. She did not have a big nose. She was just poking her nose and is not into other people's business, but like listening. Like think of it like the information center. If you want to know what's going on in town, you went to talk to Big Nose Kate, and she would give you the lowdown about who's coming into town, who's leaving town, who's causing trouble, who's not, who's sleeping with who.
I thought that was just called being a woman.
Well, then there's that.
Sorry, ladies.
And with that note, guys, I think we're going to end it for today. Thank you all for tuning in to Early Watch. We will be back Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. 6 a.m. Pacific. David, Dano, Tony, go ahead and do your shout outs if you have anything coming up or anything you want people to go pay attention to.
Just that Dead Horse's particular anti-feminine views are not reflective of Early Watch. And good day, everybody.
All I'll say is thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Really great conversation. And check out gunchannels.com and guntube.org.
Adios.
Hasta luego.